Hasurdzhiev, the floor is yours for the next 1 hour to have this great panel discussion coming. I'm waiting forward to it.
Thank you very much. I had the opportunity really to jump in advance on the topic, but now we will have opportunity to further develop this very interesting conversation on patients' involvement, patient engagement, but also some of the challenges that patient groups might have in a row and how we overcome this in the future. So as some of you already know, I'm Stanimir Hasurdzhiev. I'm the director of the National Patients Organization in Bulgaria. For many years, I've been chairing this organization as well. And in Europe, I'm the Secretary General of the Patient Access Partnership, which is a pan-European platform focusing and working in patient access and how we make sure that access is properly addressed in all aspects of the healthcare systems, products development and provision, but also patient services that need to be in place there. I have here for this session a really good number of representatives of the patients community, but also organizations that are dealing with different aspects of the needs of the patients, like trainings and for patient groups and patient experts. So very, very interesting speakers, and I will stop my talk here and would like to start with a round of introduction for each of the speakers to give you opportunity in a few minutes time to represent yourself and also the organization that you represent, and also the key advocacy activities that are priority for each of your organizations. Just to mention that the audience is quite diverse, and maybe not all of them know what is Patients Umbrella and Coalition, etc. So try to use understandable words for everyone, and maybe to make the information relevant to everyone who is listening to us right now. So maybe we will start with the order that is here on the internet slides that everyone can see. So Jeffrey, please.
I had to unmute myself. Well, one thing for certain, we have a big task because Megan and Emma and Stanimir, that was a phenomenal panel you just led. So I really appreciated that a lot. Quickly, and I apologize, my voice, I'm under the weather a little bit today, so my voice isn't great. I have a different background. I live in Boston area. I worked for the #3 payer in the US, leading strategy for Aetna, which was acquired by CVS recently. And then I worked in care management, provider contracting, and I reported to the clinical head of pharmacy at Aetna. And I left to become CEO of a precision medicine oncology firm, focused on developing a new model for precision medicine, integrating all the silos of healthcare. And I was fortunate enough to have Peter Capitan, who I am stepping in for here as the chair of my advisory board. So I'm on the Inspire to Live advisory board, and I'm on the advisory board of a patient foundation in Arizona called ANCAN.
Very good. If you can share with us exactly what your role within the advisory boards and your engagement with patient groups is, because I think this is a very interesting new trend of having multi-stakeholder kind of advisory boards or working in a multi-stakeholder platforms. This is definitely something that patient groups are doing, and we see it more and more in the future. So your experience and your topics of engagement with patient groups and advocacy according to your experience.
Well, I wonder if we should do all the introductions. I actually have 4 slides that I was going to share that would speak to that better. But one thing I would say based on the earlier conversation that I would phrase slightly differently is I focus on patients and their care partners. As you mentioned, Stanimir, in your comments throughout, the patients are obviously, stressed and under duress due to having a potentially serious illness. and not always able to focus on what's going on. So I would stress that when we talk about patient advocacy, we include, and I think everyone on this call knows that, their care partners, because you really have to educate them and bring them into the mix as they're you know, responsible for helping the patients make decisions and get to appointments and be compliant with their medications. So that's really a key aspect of it too. But I wonder if I should do the slides, and I can do them quickly, but after we do the introductions. Does that make sense?
Sure. So let us continue with the others in the call, and meanwhile you can prepare your slides, and then we can jump back to the topics more concretely. So, Edith.
Yes, hi. So I'm so happy to be here and see some friendly and new faces and a wonderful conference, really. I'm Edith. I'm a medical sociologist and ethicist by background. I work for Eurordis, so I'm pretty sure most of you must have heard of Eurordis. We're a patient umbrella organization, which means that we help quite a range of patient organizations in several areas. We have now reached over 1,000 members recently. So we're celebrating our 25th anniversary with very good news of reaching more than 1,000 members. We have our member organizing according to national alliances. So that will be all disease areas within each country, but also federations. So European Federation, that means that these are organizations of patients that are working together because they are in the same disease area. Our areas of work involve, of course, advocacy based on what we bring forth from the patients, education for patients, care, patients organization, in order for them to really have the tools to do their own work and do their own advocacy and work with the pharmaceutical companies and follow their interests. We also do research, so we're involved in several big European projects where, again, we bring the voice of the patient. I will perhaps talk a little bit more about one example of that, which is Green for Care, when we start the discussion. And that's it. We're very much, all we do when we wake up in the morning until we go back home is try to see how we can help empower the patient community through the patients' organizations.
And very good partner of the organizations I represent, at least. We are members from the National Patients Organization, associate members of Eurordis, having a section within our organization on rare diseases, but also you're a key partner for us in the Patient Access Partnership and the activities that we are doing there in Brussels. So with this, we go to our next speaker, Natacha, if I pronounce it right, from the Lymphoma Coalition.
Perfectly, thank you. Yes, my name is Natacha Bolaños. I work with the Lymphoma Coalition. Lymphoma Coalition is a global network of 88 patient organizations from 55 countries. We are making this year our 20 years. And we basically are working in two equal pillars, equal in terms of relevance. One is information provision, and to produce evidence-based advocacy. That means that everything we do is based on data that is collected through our global patient survey that it's run every 2 years, so we can build upon previous findings, and that's really key to bring robust insights to all stakeholders to try to improve not only the clinical practice but also all the dimensions of access to lymphoma care based on data, on evidence. And we partner with most of the lymphoma research institutes, scientific societies, with capacity building platforms as EUPATI and other umbrella patient organizations across the world.
Very good. Thank you very much. And we go to Tamás from Patvocates, and also he is very much involved in EUPATI that you just mentioned, and I'm keen to hear more from Tamás.
Sure. Hello, everyone. It's good to be here with you. So my name is Tamás Bereczky, and indeed, I have been involved with Patvocates, which is a patient-led, patient-established consultancy working with patient organizations and also with the pharmaceutical industry, promoting and developing patient involvement and patient engagement programs and schemes, frameworks, and also educational programs primarily for patient organizations, which is indeed related to the European Patients Academy, where I have been heavily involved in their work. I used to be the course coordinator for many years, developing and delivering courses to patients, and also to a lesser extent to the pharmaceutical industry, courses on patient involvement and primarily patient involvement in science, research and development. And I'm still there as a tutor, as a trainer and facilitator, even though I'm no longer responsible for developing courses. My colleague, my excellent colleague Jana Popova, is responsible for that. And at the same time, I also work as a researcher. I hold a PhD in social psychology. My research field is patient advocacy, patient involvement. That's what I've been writing about and researching. So also being an HIV patient and living with a bunch of other chronic conditions, I have been doing practical stuff, peer help and patient support help in Hungary and in Germany, but also at the same time I'm involved in theory.
Very good. Just a question out of curiosity for you and your experience in developing training programs. Have you ever considered developing a training program for institutions, let's say European or national institutions? And
it does exist actually within EUPATI.
Yes.
So there are. So EUPATI has a couple of standard offerings, courses, and certain adaptations of these courses are specifically for institutions and also for researchers. So they have changed these contents that were developed originally for the patient community with a view to the specific needs of institutions and how they can. I mean, EUPATI was, and still to some extent is, an EU funded project. So it was kind of our mandate as well to spread the word, and so one way of that has been developing these courses. Another way is, of course, that these by now 250 patient experts who graduated from EUPATI are basically everywhere. So they carry the message, and that's how we then can spread the word.
Very good. And we are coming to our last but not least speaker, Magdalena. Please go ahead. Is Magdalena online?
Hello and good afternoon, everyone. It's a great pleasure to be here with you today, especially as it is a special day for my community, as we are observing the World Heart Day. And I represent a European patient community with FH Europe. We are progressively moving from a patient support group to an advocacy and patient support community. It's a network of 29 patient organizations across wider Europe. And we advocate for people with inherited dyslipidemias. Majority of them lead to premature cardiovascular diseases, hence the close relation to World Heart Day today. And I think once we move to the discussion and the needs and work in the space of advocacy, it's really emphasizing that cardiovascular disease remains killer number one in the world, and yet some other support and advocacy groups have done fantastic work, and I can only applaud you for raising global awareness around other diseases, whereas cardiovascular disease has been it stayed in a shadow, and it took a disaster like COVID to really demonstrate how long cardiovascular diseases have been neglected and what a serious public health burden it is. But that's not to overshadow the importance and the need of all of us representing different communities and different needs. But once again, I could not have asked for a better platform to speak about it today. Thank you.
Thank you very much. And we are actually diving now into the real topic that we have today. It's all for one and one for all. And I guess this topic has been chosen to demonstrate really the added value, but also the challenges that we have ahead of us in working in coalitions. And this was obviously one of the topics of the previous session. Cooperation, collaboration on all levels is key. And definitely cooperation and collaboration is not easy task and topic, and I guess all of you would confirm that. And there are some key success factors, but also key hurdles that we need to overcome. What's the added value of working of coalition according to your experience, and what are the trends of this cooperation to expand beyond the patient's narrow scope, and if you consider such, or if you have such experience, and I guess most of you do have, because you already shared some knowledge on that. But I think the audience needs to understand how and why we work in a structured way. This is very key to be said, structured way in cooperation between each other. Here we have international and European-based patient groups, but also we have some very experienced patient advocates as Tamás. So I don't know whether we should go back to the slides. Does some of you have slides? Different. Okay, so maybe we have to finish with the slides topic, and then start the conversation around these topics. I guess also very relevant to the slides we want to see.
Jeff, are you able to share your slides? You should be.
Do you want to bring them up, or should I? If you can
Yes.
bring them up, that'd be better. That's good.
Yeah, my colleague is sharing.
That's way better than me. So Stanimir, I know this isn't a presentation, it's a panel, so I'm going to go through these quickly, but I think it'll set the stage for the discussion a little bit. And I don't know, Georgiana, how to advance them. Can you go to the next slide? What I wanted to provide is just a very high level perspective of where we are on healthcare today, which I think patient advocacy, and I like the distinction made in the earlier panel of advocacy versus engagement. But I wanted to just characterize a few slides of where we are in healthcare, because I feel that we're at a real tipping point in the healthcare industry globally right now, not only in developing countries, but also in developed countries and developing countries. And in the old days, as this slide shows, we used to have sort of intuitive expert physicians with intuitive medicine, and they would gauge symptoms and develop care. We moved to sort of an evidence-based medicine where we used a few biomarkers. You know, if you were BRCA positive or BRAF positive, they might develop a first line of treatment for you. But now we've really moved into an algorithm-based model where we're gathering a lot of different data on patients. There are now enormous number of diagnostics tests available, and AI tools becoming available to analyze patient data and better guide therapeutic interventions. So we're at a stage as we try to address these concerns about patient advocacy and patient education, where it's converging on a transformation in healthcare. You go to the next slide there, please. And I think everyone knows this, but one role of patient advocacy is we have a very dysfunctional siloed healthcare system, from physicians all the way down to, you know, pharmaceutical diagnostics firms. And I used to have a saying that the only thing that crosses all the silos of the healthcare system is the patient. But now I say it's the patient and their data. So one important role, and this is more the engagement portion of patient support, is helping patients on this pathway navigate and integrate between all these silos, because they're confronting each one of these components of the healthcare system individually, and their clinician may not be able to help them with, you know, the latest diagnostics firms and the latest interpretation of results. So, or maybe reimbursement from their payer. So we have to find a way to help patients navigate through the overall patient pathway, not just for initial diagnosis, but for ongoing treatment and recurrence and things of that nature. Next slide, please. And I mentioned earlier, diagnostics are really driving a much better ability to stratify patients. We are much better able now to achieve the precision medicine goal of delivering the right medicine at the right time to the right patient, but it's by really advanced diagnosis. So we stratify patients into a subgroup that more able to target therapies to specific conditions, specific family history, diagnostic results, current symptoms, and guide therapy using diagnostics. And next slide, please. As evidence of that, these are the FDA approvals over the last 10 years where there was a biomarker associated with the therapy, and you can see it's split between cancer and non-cancer therapies, but we're moving much further along the pathway of advanced diagnostics really guiding therapeutic interventions. And so I think that's one thing patient advocates have to be aware of in helping patients look at, you know, the diagnostic side in addition to therapeutic interventions. Next slide. And as we've all talked about, you know, big data is a wide and emerging area. One thing I would say, though, is there are tons of data out there and lots of tools being made available, but they're not all targeted to patients, in my view. The thing is, there's a lot of digital technology that's been, you know, involved in all our lives, and, you know, whether you're buying a Netflix video or what you're doing, but all those tools are now clamoring for some share of the healthcare, you know, revenue market. I'm not sure they're all necessarily. There are some advantages to using some of these digital technologies, but it's also a bit of an overwhelming challenge, and it may not all be directly driven to help patients, but to help other aspects of the healthcare industry. So there are things that can be helpful and things that may not be as helpful. So that's another area that we're navigating. I think it's the last slide. So I had a quote on here. I think you know Eric Topol, but his view is that if we can gather a lot of this data, artificial intelligence can make healthcare patient focused again. And the reason why is right now our physicians spend a lot of time gathering patient data. If they were able to have other mechanisms to gather patient data, they could spend their 15 minutes with the patient actually talking about the patient rather than measuring things and recording things in their software. So the key is allowing physicians who have very short time with a patient to focus on the patient again. So if we can use data gathering to take that out of the equation, then they can look at patient-reported outcomes and patient concerns. And so my concluding points, I think, will be the end of our discussion. So I won't go through them now, but we really have a unique chance right now as the healthcare system globally is changing dramatically to step up the patient advocacy and patient engagement role in guiding diagnosis and treatment for all patients. And so the key word I would end with is access. We've got to assure it doesn't do any good unless the patient has access to the things that will help them improve. Thank you.
Couldn't agree more with you. I think this was really good outline of some of the challenges, but I would say also some of the opportunities that we have in front of us, because technology, besides creating challenges, might actually be the opportunity that could help us overcome all these challenges. that you just mentioned. And if you were able to listen in our previous session, I just shared a recent development on a technology we are working together with patients, and it's voice interaction with patients. So it could happen in the most natural way to engage with them and also to provide the information that each patient might need. And if not to replace the doctor in this process, at least to be very helpful and handy tool in the hands of the doctor and the healthcare professionals to provide the needed information and the needed interaction to the patients. Also a very nice tool for the patient groups. I'm happy to hear opinions on all that we heard. I think it was very good for setting the scene, setting some of the challenges and some of the opportunities for the future. So please, to the rest of the participants, any first insights and comments also in line with my question to you. How relevant is that to your daily activities and the challenges that you have in your organizations, working in coalitions, but also developing and meeting these challenges in coalitions? So who wants to start with that? Please go ahead. Okay. Edith?
Yeah, so talking about all the activities of EUPATI would be a bit too much. So I can give an example, and I think that would make things more concrete in terms of the ways that we work with coalitions and the way that bringing things together really help us in bringing things forward. So one of the big projects that we're involved in is, like I said, Screen for Care. It's a huge European project where we focus on early diagnosis with the concept of having early diagnosis for rare diseases being very beneficial at several levels for the patient community. One of the aspects of it is newborn screening and genetic newborn screening. So I really like what you said about looking at the future, because one of the things that we have to do as a patient community and in advocacy definitely is looking where things go in the future and positioning ourselves in terms of that and being able to have our say within that. So if we take this project, which is a project that involves both industry and public partners, so we're talking about a 25 million euro project supported by the European Commission, 5 years, it's huge. EUPATI is really proud to have a position within this project where we can bring the patient's voice through several mechanisms. One important thing, and again, I want to make it more concrete by giving a specific example, is the work that we're doing about newborn screening. So the idea is that we want to have a pilot on newborn screening, genetic newborn screening, using some blood spot from some 20,000 newborns that will be throughout Europe, in Germany and Italy. So we're actually going to do genetic testing within the project. But then the challenge is, and where we really want the patients to be involved in, what diseases should we be testing? So we're not talking about whole genome sequencing. And even if we were talking about whole genome sequencing, the question would be what diseases to report back. Here we're talking about panels. And then a big discussion where we need to have the patients involved is what is at stake about wanting to know about this disease or another disease? Why should the condition be involved in integrated into a newborn screening program, and why another condition shouldn't? Do the parents really want to know? What effect does it have on the patient's life not having had the diagnosis at birth in cases where that would have been possible? Lots of the time research go to public discourse. So we just ask the public, what would you like to know?
Oh, yeah.
But really people that live with rare disease are living with the results often of not having been diagnosed at birth, and they have to suffer the consequences and have to live through the diagnostic odyssey. So what we believe is that we need to ask the rare disease patient community, not just through an advisory board. We do have a patient advisory board in the project, but we're doing something a bit further, which is involving our Rare Barometer program and EUPATI, where we're going to send questionnaires. The last questionnaire we had 13,000 respondents from the rare disease community. So we're talking about rare disease patients and their family responding to our question that was on diagnosis. So we're going to do the same thing, asking them really about what is at stake in terms of newborn screening and how the rare disease patient community is affected by not having a possible diagnosis at birth. And that would be what will be the ground and the force and the weight that we bring with us when we're going to advocate for broadening or not broadening the current newborn screening practices.
Fantastic example. Fantastic example to kick on the topic, how important it is to involve patients. I'll be happy actually if you provide this questionnaire not through the traditional way, but also experiment new ways like voice interaction with your patients community. Why not? Any comments on that and any addition of examples or comments on the importance of working in coalitions, working together with patients and involving them in the process? Please. Natacha is raising hand.
I would start by telling that, and probably it's known by everyone, no? If you want to go fast, go alone, but if you want to go far, go together. So it's fundamental. And in this precise moment, not only to plan short, medium, and long term, so we want to go far, but also to be capable to consolidate as you walk through the pathway. And to consolidate, you need to work with other people. You need to work with not only all stakeholders, but also with your community members. So for instance, for us in the Lymphoma Coalition, we try to identify the different, let's say, audiences we serve. In first term, our own community, our members. Our members are all the patient organizations that serve the patients, the caregivers, the family members, those who live with lymphomas or are affected by lymphomas. But of course, if we try to serve them only to them, we won't be doing the right work. So you need to provoke change of behavior in those that are responsible to provide care. So you need to work with the policymakers to ensure that there will be laws supporting and policies supporting lymphoma care in our case, and with regulators and with payers, with HTA bodies, with other patient organizations working in the field or working at transversal level. I think that one of the biggest challenges of being a patient advocate is that somehow you are called to be an expert of absolutely everything. When you are a clinician, if you are an hematologist, and in the Western Europe countries, for instance, they have the luxury of specializing in a specific lymphoma subtype. But if you, as soon as you open your eyes, you find countries where there are clinicians and even primary care practitioners who are serving every kind of patient, no matter if they have cancer, a rare disease, or a diabetes. They need to go through the same services because access to healthcare services is quite limited. And they do not have the workforce they need, and they do not have budgetary allocation, and they do not have the technology they need. So it's fantastic when we talk about precision medicine, you know, NGS, genomics, but this is a reality in only 20% of the world. This is not the reality for most of the people. What we learned through the COVID pandemic, and it's so sad that we needed to live 2 full years in a very disruptive world to understand that we won't be safe until everyone will be safe. We wouldn't be able to have vaccines if all the manufacturers of medicines were working together. All the researchers suddenly were working with open access data to make it available for everybody because we needed to build upon previous findings. So it's a perfect example of how much you can speed changes and speed discovery and speed better practices and learning of best practices when we share. And I think that's probably one of the best learnings we should, infuse in our DNA transform that into a kind of mutation to infuse the new generations, that the world cannot be more about competition. It's important to try to find the level of excellence in everything you do, but not to compete, just to be able to provide your best self to serve others and to cooperate with others.
Couldn't agree more with your words as well. I mean, this is key learning, and if you look back in the history of humankind, you can see many examples as the COVID we had. Have we learned our lessons from all the pandemics we had in the past, all the wars we had, all the issues we had with different systems in the world? And do we finally understand that healthcare is not a simple market? It's something that is to be linked to people's life, and this has to be the leading purpose for all of us to continue working. So, but I'm interested to listen to Tamás right now, because Tamás, you're representing patients community. You are very much linked with the patients. But for example, you represent right now a company that's patient-led. How you make sure that the patient's voice is properly and relevant to everything that you do, regardless that you are doing quite innovative way of setting a company and consultancy, let's say. This is really appreciated from my personal point of view, but I think we have to see that more in the future, patients to be leading on this type of businesses, if we can call this so.
But that's exactly what I wanted to. Well, it's yeah, it's complicated, but that's exactly what I wanted to follow up on. Even though it's very difficult to say anything after these very moving words from Natacha, which came from my heart actually, but there are some good examples, some good institutional examples for facilitating and enabling partnerships and cooperation. So I think that already the project that Edith mentioned, right? So which is again based on a large coalition of patients and other stakeholders, but also there are very specific research projects like the Harmony Alliance, where Natacha is also a participant, which is a big data project in the blood cancer space. Again, an IMI-IHI supported project, which has been running for almost 7 years now, where the patient communities, the patient umbrella organizations for specific hematologic malignancies are sitting at the table with full decision-making rights, right? So they are part of the consortium. They have equal rights to submit research proposals. They have equal rights to use the big data platform. They have been consulted about core outcome sets, and so all the various aspects of the project. And this model is being repeated in several other. Is there? No, okay. So this model or this process is being repeated in other projects as well. So there's a new one coming up again by Horizon Europe about polymedicine again. So taking more than 5 compounds at once, which are not related to your primary illness, but you just have to take them to mitigate your side effects and whatever. So how do you handle that? What do you do? Again, the patient communities are there, right? So they are not just invited, they are required to join. Or if you look at the system that the EMA has set up for patient involvement, and that happened certainly over a long period of time, took them about 15 years to set up this structure that they have now. But patients must be involved at every decision, at every consultation process. So there are encouraging signs. Unfortunately, another learning from the COVID pandemic is also how fragile these structures have been. Because if you look at COVID-related research, that's really not where patient involvement was championed so much, right? So that's and you probably are aware that there have been several articles about this even in the BMJ, how little patient involvement there has been, and then there were these arguments, yes, but there was very little time, and who are the patients at all if it affects the entire population of the earth? How do you define patient? Even though I think that we could have come up with solutions there, but that's so I think that we have to remain steadfast, and that's actually, I mean, you mentioned our company. That's actually what we've been trying to do. Demonstrate that it is good for everyone if you involve patients, and not just ethically good. It's not just the right thing to do, but it's actually useful, right? It's useful in a commercial sense. It's fine, and it makes things cheaper and easier. It's also it produces more relevant outcomes, which can again be translated into even commercial key performance indicators. So but that's secondary to, I think that's secondary to the main objective, which is keeping this fire burning, right? Which seems to be the most difficult part of it. That it's my essential need, but also right as a patient to participate. It's about me, it's about my body, it's about my tissue, right? It's about my life. So I want to be part of this process. And I think that seems to be the most challenging bit.
Sorry, my microphone was stopped. Exactly. How do we do meaningful patients involvement? And this is one of the first projects that European Patients Forum has been working in the past EU-funded project to define what is meaningful patients involvement and what assets we need to make sure we have in advance in order to prepare the patients community for this moment, for meaningful patients involvement. We cannot expect that patients who come from different settings, education background, etc., would provide enough and sufficient expertise on every topic that we expect, as Natacha said. But we have to work towards that. Magdalena, we haven't heard your comments on all this.
Thank you. I think I would like to build, without necessarily repeating what has so far been said, and try to imagine a scenario where we can move away steadily from the concept of patient to person and person engagement, where through building on what we have to date, available knowledge, data, and collaboration, by demonstrating the effectiveness of prevention, and by detecting some of the conditions underlying risk factors, specifically in case of FH, I will focus on familial hypercholesterolemia. It's one of the conditions we advocate for, but this specific one happens to be the most common genetic condition in the world. It affects about 1 person in 300, but because it's very often mistaken or misdiagnosed and taken just for cholesterol, high cholesterol as a result of your lifestyle, diet, a lack of activity, physical activity, and so on and so forth, it seems to be very often mixed up and not really diagnosed appropriately. But going back to the initial concept, what if we all collaborated well and applied cost-effective tools like screening and early correct diagnosis, and never even allowed for an individual to get to the stage when they are a patient? I am a little bit, I'm not a great fan of the term patient, because I feel like in some disease areas, it actually degrades an individual to someone who's less capable or less informed or less able to contribute. And so in our specifically community, I think the engagement and the co-creation has been lagging behind for many years, purely because an individual could live with the underlying cause for many years until it strikes unexpectedly, suddenly, and then it is the premature heart attack, stroke, or even, unfortunately, in some cases, premature death. And when I say premature, it can be anything as early as 4 years old, because we also have the severe and rare form, which this is why we partner as well with Eurordis when it comes to rare diseases. And so, building on what has been said and using all the information, technology, innovation, artificial intelligence, obviously we need to apply all of those existing tools and solutions, but to Natacha's point, we need to expand our collaboration by going beyond our usual suspects: patient, doctor, pharma, and engage other important stakeholders. And here, specifically in our case, in engaging insurance companies, policymakers, and demonstrating, to Tamás's point, it's not only ethically correct and smart, but also, and I think in the lingo of politicians, is cost effective to our very fragile and already tired health care system. And so this collaboration, an example here is that it's the patient's community submitted to the European Union, best practice screening, early childhood screening, which was recognized officially as a best practice. And I've realized that actually not many people realize that it's a term, it's an acknowledgement that a public health solution is a best practice. And then specifically for Europe, it can be then replicated and funded. And so it was the patient's community who pushed for it, got it to that point, and now specifically pediatric screening is brought to the attention of the policymakers and politicians in Europe, and we are actively fighting for funding. I wish we were in that situation as Eurordis, to have that secure funding that you have, which is fantastic, and I congratulate you on that. But my point here really is, what if we allowed ourselves to think about moving forward through partnership, collaboration, and effective use of available solutions to move away from, specifically in our case, cardiovascular disease to cardiovascular health, population health. So that's my example of what we're striving for and where we're trying to collaborate with different stakeholders.
Extremely good example as well. And I'm sure that in 1 hour time, it's very difficult to put all aspects here on the table, but it seems that we already have covered many of the issues. And I would just clarify with you, Magdalena, because I do believe in what you say, that we are all citizens, we are all people, and having the terminology patient is not always relevant, but I personally believe that you become patient at the moment when you enter a pharmacy to buy your aspirin or whatever you are using. So you are a patient at the moment when somebody is serving your healthcare needs in a broader aspect. But if you come out with a new terminology that is much more relevant, I'm happy to use that as well. But for the time being, I personally feel a patient anytime when I interact with someone who might have something related to my health, but couldn't agree more with you. Health is what matters, not the disease.
Stanimir, could I add
Sure.
a slightly different wrinkle here? One thing I've been pointing out to a lot of people, which I think we're aware of, is there is a huge challenge in advocating for patients and navigating this system. But I think now my bias is US based, which isn't necessarily representative of the world. But one thing we have to be sensitive to are the providers globally are overwhelmed. So we're trying to help gather more data on patients, but we have to be very sensitive to the providers. There's so many new diagnostics and therapies available. We're now treating rare diseases which had no treatments previously. So they're really in a tough spot. And a tiny anecdotal example I give, and Boston's not representative, but my children go to a pediatric practice at Boston Children's Hospital, 9 pediatricians at Boston Children's Hospital. How many active patients do you think 9 pediatricians have?
Well, it's a challenge, but you are also privileged, for example, to have AI technologies, voice interaction opportunities. Can you imagine the Bulgarian pediatricians who might rely on Alexa that is not even talking in Bulgarian language?
I know, no, I know. Although my college roommate was Bulgarian, I want you to know, but and I can say a few things in Bulgarian thanks to Gargana, but they have 38,000 active patients for 9 pediatricians. So imagine that one patient's representative says, I'm going to help you communicate with your patient now. They're just, my point is broader, and I think it applies broader than the US. There are not enough providers anywhere in the US or in the world. So we have to be very sensitive that we want to advocate for patients, but the providers need a lot of help also, because they're crossing these same silos and they're being compressed on costs of care, on access to care. And so anything we can do to help the provider and the doctor helps the patient as well.
Couldn't agree more with that point of view as well. I see that Natacha wants to interact with this, and I would ask you, because we are coming quite close to the end of this session, even though it's very interesting, and we should prolong it and continue this conversation. But yes, Natacha.
No, yeah, I just wanted to add that to build upon that, in that reinforce everything we have talked about, the need to work in partnership. I mean, in collaboration. When we talk about working in collaboration, we are not discarding, but in any way, clinicians, healthcare providers. It's important to understand the needs, the challenges from every that point of view, and to understand and to try to find, even by co-creation. And I think that's one of the wonderful learnings when you really partner as equals with other members, no matter who they are. And you need to understand their challenges, their own barriers, and even the barriers for regulators, for policymakers, for payers. Also, it's not easy to allocate resources for serving well, and the differences in health literacy levels, for instance, and all those. Stanimir, I wanted to tell you, at 3 o'clock is scheduled a lecture I was going to give in evidence-based advocacy, but I'm super happy. I don't know if this is accepted or not by anyone in the organization, but I'm super happy for us to extend this dialogue, because I think that we will get much more benefit from extending this debate rather than to have one person just talking about something that is part of what we are discussing right now.
Exactly. Maybe Gergana to jump into this call, because currently I know that our time restriction is by 3 o'clock Central European time, so you calculate it wherever you are. But I would agree with you. We have to continue with this conversation, and I'm happy to facilitate this dialogue between us even afterwards, because at least in my head, I have some very interesting ideas and insights from talking only with you, and hopefully the audience has some interactions, questions as well. Gergana, if you hear this call, please interact with us and tell us if we can continue. Yes.
Yes,
Natacha?
you have 5 more minutes, and we have a question in the chat. I've just forwarded it.
Okay, very good. So with that in mind, I mean, we saw so many challenges. We see also opportunities in terms of technologies, in terms of new ways of collaborating and cooperating between ourselves and with other stakeholders. Your takeaway or your recommendation for the future, how we make sure that this dialogue doesn't happen only at Biotech Ateliers or any other forums, but we continue to have this conversation on a regular, structured way, and in a way that it will bring the added value and the results we all expect from such kind of cooperation. Even between the patient representatives, it's not always sufficient as we would like to see in the future. But what would you do, or what your recommendation would be how we can improve in the future and how we make sure that we leverage the best outcome out of these conversations between us and other stakeholders. And with this, probably we have to start looking into the conclusions of this session, which is a good reference of starting conversation between us, but probably a good way to plan the future. So who wants to be the first in kind of concluding remarks and also future-proofing remarks?
If you allow me, I will go first, as I have to leave on time to the next speaking appointment. I would like to say that I believe in health literacy, and health literacy not only among patients, but all stakeholders. We've been acting too much in silos, and I think that was very well demonstrated in the first presentation. Patients have something to say. They just need to be able to be both welcomed and heard, but also need to be educated to know how to tailor their message. Clinicians need to be open and invite patients and recognize the value they bring. But it doesn't necessarily mean that every single person now becomes an expert on every single condition, and I take that already. I truly believe that we also need to remind ourselves about our individual responsibility and not wait for others to take a responsibility for our health. And an example, a conclusion example would be that if you want to have a car, you will go and look up on the internet what color, what function, what seats, what insurance, and everything, you know, and can you afford it? I think it's the same with health. We cannot wait for someone to serve us a ready recipe. We know best probably how a specific disease affects us. And we need to as well empower public in taking responsibility and this health literacy to help build this informed dialogue with the health service provider. So all in all, fundamentally for me, it comes to education, health literacy, but also mutual respect for what we all bring to the table.
Exactly. Just to mention on top of that, not always everyone wants to be engaged and involved, and we have to respect this as well. Many patients simply don't want to be involved at such level, but others do want.
And that's why we have patient advocates.
Exactly, exactly. So who's next?
I go next. Also because then I also have the next appointment coming up. My dream would be, referring back to what Natacha said before, trying to overcome this competition across disease areas, across personalities, across organizations, which is usually competition for resources, and have a global patient conference. And global would be extremely important because there are many, many countries where people don't have the privilege of choice of anything, right? So it's and they also have issues with their healthcare systems, if they have a healthcare system at all. So I think that we need to cast a broader net or a wider net and try to be more inclusive, because that will also show how futile this competition has been and how much we must work together. So that would be my and also bringing together all these different threads that we are all aware of, right? So that there's this educational project, and then there's that partnership. And so what have we learned from all of these, and how can we bring it together and share the experience for the greater good?
That's a very, very nice input, Tamás. Thanks a lot. And who is the next one to kind of put closing remarks at this talk and this session? Natacha, Jeff, am I missing someone?
I guess I would just echo really what Tamás and Natacha said. And one thing I would say is I view that the new technologies in healthcare interventions can maybe help the developing world more so that they don't have to go through the same learning process that the developed countries did. An example is if we are a developed country and we're not able to treat cervical cancer well, but we're able to get HPV vaccinations more universally accepted, then it can alleviate a lot of those situations. So we have to find ways to, and several other people brought this up, to prevent illness and foster wellness rather than constantly focusing on expensive interventions after disease has become more prevalent. So that's one way of being more inclusive, to Tamás's point, that we have to take our lessons learned and apply them earlier in the patient pathway.
Couldn't agree more. That it's important, but also it's important that patients who need the treatment and innovation to be in place. And somebody mentioned in the beginning of our conversation that we need to make sure that everyone who needs proper services and healthcare gets them. Otherwise, as COVID proved, it doesn't help if only 20% of the world has access to the innovation. I'm not sure even if this 20% is a very precise number, but it's true that only few around the world are having access to the real innovation that we have out there. Still, we have to continue developing the innovation, and I'm happy to talk about how we can best help and support the innovation in the future, but we have to make sure that it's in place and available for those who need it at the end. Who is, am I missing someone? Edith?
I have to
Yes.
leave, unfortunately, so I really loved your perspectives and really wanted to thank you for this opportunity.
Thank you very much, and for the great work that you are doing in Eurodis. Please.
We're only as good as the patient organizations that work with us.
Exactly. Thank you.
So thank you. And thank you, Gergana, for the invitation for the conference.
And Natacha, I think you are the one that has the privilege to really conclude and put the full stop of this meeting.
But you got to unmute yourself first.
I won't conclude, I'm afraid, for two reasons. One, because I will be giving the next lecture, but more importantly, because I want to challenge the organizers, and if it's not in this context, I want to challenge everyone here in the speakers panel, but also in the audience, to continue discussing how to build a world based on cooperation and not in competition, and how to get the best of the learnings that we have accumulated so far and put it together to be better equipped to do a better work for those who need it the most.
Thank you very much. Thank you. And I think I'm speechless that I'm not gonna talk anymore because I spoke enough. But it has been really, really a wonderful session, and hopefully we can have more of these interesting talks, but also to make sure that these talks are leading to some concrete actions that would change the environment we live in, rather than only talking and speaking on that. And yeah, maybe Gergana, back to you if you have something to add as organizer. Thank you very much for setting and helping us have this session. But obviously we need to continue talking, and hopefully BAPAMED and all initiatives that we are involved with would consider these talks as important and would take the messages out of them.
Thank you all.
Thank
This
you, everyone.
really, really valuable discussion. And while people like you advocate for patients with cancer, rare diseases, HIV, family hypercholesterolemia, and despite the disease, their rights and interests will be always at first place, I'm sure. And this is not the end. I believe it's the beginning of further discussions and projects. Thank you.
Thank you.
Very much.
Goodbye, everyone.
Goodbye. And talk to
Bye.
you soon, hopefully.
Yes.
Luck, Natacha.
Hi, nice to meet you all.